Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. It truly, truly is. So, today we are going back down the Reddit rabbit hole with a brand new story that I have not read yet. I'm going to be reacting to it for the first time with you guys right now. It is a verified epic story, so let's hope it lives up to the hype. 2 years of hell. How I was stalked, completely betrayed, and nearly unalived. Hi everyone, this is my first post of an actual story on Reddit, so bear with me. I've been reading everyone's amazing stories for years and felt like it was only fair that I contribute something back. Allow me to tell you about the time I dated a guy on MySpace for 2 years that nearly ended up getting my entire family unalived, me stalked by Psycho, and everyone involved nearly losing their minds. I've never written this down before or told very many people that I even trust. It's all just too painful and quite honestly unbelievable to tell often. If it didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't believe it either, but unfortunately it did. I promise what you're about to read is 100% the absolute truth. I hope you all find this interesting. To give you some background for this story. I'm an almost 28-year-old gay man who was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains. My friend's not in America, that's in the South, more towards the Mid-Atlantic region. I usually don't just throw being gay out there, but it's important to my tale and to understanding why I made such insanely poor choices in my teenage years. I know almost everyone does, but this really takes the cake. Follow me back to when I was 16, just about 12 years ago. I was a junior in high school, had plenty of friends, and no trouble with bullies. At least not while I was at school. My parents are now wonderful people who greatly regret the way they treated me when they found out I was gay. I'm sorry. At the time, I hated them for being so horrendous to me. But as I got older, I finally understood that their reaction was just a product of the strict religious movement they and myself were brought up in. Mid disclaimer, I do not have any hatred in my heart for any religion, no matter what its views are. Whatever you choose to believe in is alright by me. I'm more of a treat people the way you'd like to be treated kind of guy. This just happened to be my parents' reaction, so don't judge them too harshly. Also, I don't want the comments to turn into a religious debate and or LGBTQ rights discussion. This post is about none of that. It just so happened to be my circumstances. My parents, who at the time firmly believed that this would send my eternal soul into damnation, pretty much only allowed me to stay at our house a couple days a week after that. For at least a year, I was living on friends' couches and off the kindness of their parents. That's horrible. I was in what I could only describe as the worst state of miserable, major depression I have ever been in my entire life. I tried to unalive myself the year before with a very serious OD that cost me 9 days in the ICU. I should have died, but your liver is an amazing thing and it started to regenerate on its own. A year to the day after that, literally to the day, the first guy I ever fell in love with was killed in a tragic car accident. My parents had zero sympathy for my feelings. They were the immoral feelings of the blasphemous son, so they didn't count, I guess. I remember coming back home from his funeral that night and my father asking me, "Why are you so upset? Were you a fag with that boy or something?" That's horrible. I didn't even respond, just walked right past him and straight into my room where I proceeded to cry myself to sleep. Again, don't judge them too harshly. They were different people back then. Needless to say, this sent me completely spiraling downward in the worst way possible. Drugs, alcohol, you name it, I did it. Anything to stay numb and keep myself from feeling the immense amounts of pain I'm in emotionally every single day. To have your situation go from a year before seeing your father cry for the first time as you lay dying in a hospital bed to him spewing so much malice and hatred towards you. Let's just say it was enough to make anyone have a mental breakdown. I had friends who cared about and loved me deeply. I don't know why that wasn't enough. It just wasn't. I felt like no one truly loved me or ever would. Hell, if my own parents couldn't, then what were my chances with finding a soulmate? Would I just be alone forever and as miserable as I was then? At the time, I was in my angsty teen mind. That's exactly what it felt like. Which finally brings us through my background and mindset, leading into the pure, unadulterated hell that was soon to follow. In the midst of my deepest, darkest despair, the brightest idea anyone has ever had on this planet popped into my head. Well, if no one around here will ever love me, then I'll just go online and try to meet someone who will. Pure stroke of genius, right? Just made absolute biblical sense to me at the time. I felt like the only gay teen in the whole damn state. Like the only person who really understood me was me, and only ever would be me. That, in order to find someone who loved me, I would have to search far and wide beyond the borders of the mountainous fortress I had resided in my entire life. Proud of myself for having such ingenious idea, I immediately hopped on MySpace and spent the next hour making it as badass looking as I thought I could. You could customize just about everything on your profile. So of course, mine had to accurately reflect all my emo feelings and the darkness in my soul. Words to the wise, and something I wish I realized back then. If you're trying to attract the darker things in society, you're probably going to get back exactly what you're sending out. I know I sure as hell did. It all started out innocently enough. I clicked on one of my gay acquaintances' profiles, and for some reason, this guy on his top 8 just flew right out at me. His name was Jacob. He was gorgeous, dressed all in black, and that was pretty much all I needed to know at the time. I saw he was from Maryland, several hours away from me, but far enough to possibly not be like everyone else here. Far enough to hopefully have exactly the kind of mentality that I was looking for in another human being. So I sent him a message. Something lame to the effect of, "Hi, what's up? I saw you on my friend's top 8 and thought you were so cute, so I figured I would say hello." I wasn't expecting a response, none whatsoever. He was so gorgeous and seemed way too cool for me. So why in God's name would he message a guy like me back? And then it happened. Within a minute of me sending my message, I got one back. And it was from him. Not gonna lie, I exploded in joy on the inside. Something that I hadn't felt in years and years. It was just something like, "Hey, you're cute too. How are you?" But it was enough to send me over the moon. I felt alive again, but what I really felt was hope again. We talked the rest of the day and night. We talked about each other, how much life sucked, how bad we wanted away from our hometown and our lives. You know, the usual for teenage gay boys living in repression. I fell for him hard, too hard. I mean, hook, line, and sinker hard. We chatted for maybe a week before he asked me out. I had no problem with dating online. Hell, that was the whole point of me doing this in the first place. So I eagerly said yes. We had only been dating for a week after that or so when he introduced me to the rest of his friends. I met his ex-boyfriend Zachary and their best friend Josie, who I quickly became best friends with, along with about 10 other girls and guys. Josie was a cool chick and she had known these guys for years, so who better to give me all the dirt on them? During the course of the next month, Josie and I became the closest friends out of everyone he introduced me to. The rest of the gang were mostly just a group of suburban white kids who called themselves the elites and just drank and smoked a lot of marijuana. I had heard some crazy stories here and there about them beating people up and some of them taking the gang thing way too seriously, but I didn't really think much about it. Josie and I had been talking on the phone every single day and really made a genuine connection with each other. She had my sense of bizarre humor, was extremely intelligent, and still liked to have a crazy good time on top of it all. During this period, Jacob and I were doing great, but there was one little problem. There's always a little problem. I had started to fall in love with his ex, Zachary. Jacob could be intense and at times violent when he was angry, from what I had heard. But on the other hand, Zachary was his complete opposite. He was too kind for his own good, an extremely caring guy, and he wrote the most beautiful piano music I had ever heard. Being a musician myself, French horn for 10 years, I was immediately endeared to this guy. The more and more time I spent online talking to Zachary, the less and less time I felt like talking to Jacob. Eventually, Jacob kind of figured out what was going on, and to my shock, he let me know he was cool with it, okay, and wished us the best. It's very mature. For some reason, I'm thinking he didn't mean that. That's how, after about 2 months with Jacob, I started dating his ex, Zachary. This would be the guy I would date for the next 2 years. Oh no, no, I think he legit meant that. Okay. And with whom the worst times of my life would be spent. Josie was clearly thrilled for me. We still talked every day online and on the phone. Sometimes I talked to Zachary on the phone, but more often than not, we just kept our communication to AOL Instant Messenger. When we started dating was when everything started to collapse. Jacob, who has initially said he was okay with everything, ended up exploding. He completely tore me a new one online and then proceeded to go and kidnap my current boyfriend. What? Josie called me up, freaking me the hell out, saying he'd taken Zachary and no one knew where they were. This clearly sent me reeling from shock. I guess all the rumors I heard about Jacob were true. And now, because of my actions, the guy I'm in love with is in danger. I quickly contacted some of older guys in the gang and let them know what was going on. Their response was basically, "Oh shit, not again," which caught me off guard.
What you talking about, Willis?
Again? You mean this happens frequently? I talked to Chaz, the leader of this gang, while he sent some guys out to deal with Jacob and retrieve my boyfriend. He basically told me in a nutshell that Jacob has been and always will be obsessed with Zachary. That when he gets wasted on whatever, he goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and sets out on some wild mission to kidnap and apparently violate my new boyfriend. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in complete and total shock. But apparently, this situation was resolved easily, and he handed over my man without too much incident. He also received a healthy ass beating to remind Jacob that it's not nice to go around kidnapping people just because you can. Fair. Completely reasonable. This was the first and certainly not the last. I can remember where a pattern I'm all too familiar with now would develop over the next several years. Jacob would get drunk and jealous. He would do something completely insane to me or my boyfriend. And then, after all the freaking out and worrying was over, he would come crying back to me, begging mine and Zachary's forgiveness. This became a weekly routine and it began to wear me out mentally very quickly. Flash forward to around a year after I sent the very first message to Jacob. I was still with Zachary, still best friends with Josie, who I had even been up to Maryland and met in person at this point, and was still dealing with Jacob's craptastic, insane plots to ruin my relationship and gave me a stroke before the age of 20. None of this craziness set off any red flags in my head. Not one. As a matter of fact, nothing, period, during that entire year gave me second thoughts about anything going on, really. That day to day, the sky is falling lifestyle had become the norm for me, and I was used to it. Several of my friends, however, had their doubts, though they were polite enough to keep it to themselves for the time being. This is when the first true danger that threatened me and my family ever arose, and it led to a night I will never forget as long as I live. Cut to me as a 17-year-old who, in the span of 1 year, had accomplished everything he set out to do. Had the perfect boyfriend. Even if I never met him, I didn't care. I had an awesome new best friend in Josie. We hung out a few times at that point, and I adored her. And I joined a group of my own in my hometown. My parents were going to throw me away just because of who I loved. Well, then I was going to throw away every single religious thing I had ever been taught and go to the dark side. I became a Luciferian, otherwise known as a Satanist, and boy oh boy did I think I was a badass now. Now, when it comes to the coven I joined in my hometown, that could fill an entirely different story in an entirely different subreddit. Maybe I'll post that experience sometime, but the point of telling you about them was so that you could understand what happened next. I received a call one night around 12 a.m. from Josie, who was almost beside herself. Very out of character for her. I mean, hell, Zachary had been kidnapped over 40 times in the past year, and she hardly batted an eye. But this was different. She explained to me that Jacob had really outdone himself and lost his mind this time. He had hired a guy from the elites named Sean to come down to my house and to kill me, plus my mother, father, and younger sister. My sister is about 7.5 years younger than me. And from the day she was born, I've always been fiercely protective over her. She was and still is my beautiful baby sister, and truly the only one in my household that I loved at the time. When I heard that my ex had taken it so far as to hire a hitman to come after my family, I flew into what we around here call a mountain range. It didn't matter to me if someone simply came after me, but to target my precious sister who had nothing to do with any of this was the boiling point for me. And even though I despised my parents at the time, I'm still a Southerner. And when you mess with a Southerner's family, then all the crap you're fighting about goes right out the window. Complete and total defend the homestead mode kicked in. I asked Josie when he left Maryland. She told me she found out that he started driving towards my house maybe an hour ago. And as soon as she found out, she called me immediately. Okay, so that meant I had at the most 6 hours to prepare and at least possibly four if he got a good head start. She also informed me that Sean was a former Army guy, but got kicked out for failing several psych tests and being a complete sociopath in general. I'm not a big guy, and at the time I weighed even less than I do now. I was 5'7" and maybe weighed 130 pounds soaking wet. But my first thought didn't require brute strength to beat back this attacker. I called up my coven leader, Brandon, who lived not even 10 minutes away from me, and explained the situation. I told him I needed to borrow his favorite toy, and I promised to bring it back in good condition with as little blood on it as possible. He agreed. About 30 minutes later, I was back in my room cleaning and loading an extremely nice over and under pump action shotgun. Like I said, no brute force required. I called Josie back up and got the details on exactly what he and his car looked like. Then around 4 a.m., I told her I would call her back and crept out into my front yard. Now, for people who had never been to my house, they always got where to park at wrong. They always ended up in front of my house down a hill instead of in the driveway on the side. This little detail was stuck in my mind and probably saved my life. In the very front of my yard, there was a huge oak tree that was big enough for my skinny girl jean wearing emo ass to hide perfectly behind. All I had to do was wait and hope he did exactly what I thought he would. I got so lucky. He parked exactly on the opposite side of the big tree I was hiding behind. I heard a car door open and someone step outside of the vehicle, shortly followed by the unmistakable cocking of a 9mm. While that sound may have struck fear into the hearts of others, it absolutely enraged me to the core. So I replied in kind with a sound of my own. As I stepped around the side of the tree, he was directly in front of his car, gun down by his side. In one motion, I simultaneously pumped a shell into the chamber of my shotgun and raised it directly level with his head about 10 feet away from me. This caught him off guard and completely by surprise. I didn't hesitate. I simply told him the God's honest truth. I said, buddy, you've got one of two options right now. Either you get back in your car, turn around, and drive straight back to Maryland without stopping, or you can so much as flinch in my general direction, and I will splatter your brains all across the great state of insert my state. You have 5 seconds to decide what's it going to be. I kid you not, the most sickly smile spreads across this psycho's face, and for a moment, I thought we were about to reenact the movie Tombstone. Fortunately, he had much more of a sense of self preservation than I thought someone who just drove 8 hours to kill a family would have. All he did was give a little chuckle and say, "You're a cool dude, see you around." What? He then walked backwards very slowly, my gun following him the entire way, got back in his car, and just drove off. Right then and there, I made up my mind I had to tackle the beast head on. I was always raised that if you have a problem, be a damn man and take care of it yourself. Had to go to my enemy Jacob's house and bring this war to his doorstep just like he brought to mine. It was time to go to Maryland. After all the drama of nearly being murdered by a nut job, I really had enough of Jacob's BS at this point. I got online and cussed him out until a fly wouldn't land on him, making a point to let him know that this little plan backfired. He wasn't dealing with some poor little boy that couldn't fend for himself, and each and every crazy situation that evolved had made me stronger as a person, if not a little bit more mentally disturbed every time. I told him he was going to regret the day he ever crossed me and my boyfriend. Instead of apologizing like usual, his true colors came out. He laughed at me. He freaking laughed at me. He told me I was cute when I was angry and said what a damn shame it was that I didn't have a bullet hole in my head. He wished I was dead and that he never spoke to me in the first place because he was still in love, more like insanely obsessed with his ex, my current boyfriend of a year, Zachary. He informed me that the war was just beginning and he would do everything in his power to win Zachary back, like he was some kind of adorable trophy you won for baking the best freaking pie at the county fair. I was incensed, completely livid and brimming to the edge of fury. I told him to watch his back because I'm coming for him. I called Josie and told her everything that happened and asked if I could come stay with her for a week. She excitedly agreed. Zachary was asleep for this whole ordeal and blissfully unaware that anything had happened. When he found out the next day, I think he was even more angry than I was. Fortunately for us, the gang's leader, Chaz, liked Zachary a whole hell of a lot more than he did Jacob. So we hatched a plan with him. The idea was for them to kidnap Jacob like he had Zachary so many times before. They would be accomplishing this task while I was on my way up to Maryland, and when I got there, he would be mine to do with as I pleased. You can imagine on the 8-hour drive up there all the hideous and heinously brutal ideas that were going through my mind. I was going to inflict maximum amounts of pain on the guy that had caused so much in my own life, and I would relish every second of it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, my dreams of reviving the Spanish Inquisition on my exes never came to fruition. When I arrived in Maryland, Josie came skipping out to greet me, happy as a lark like always to see me. She had some good and bad news. I always asked for the bad news first, and the bad news was that Jacob had gotten tipped off by Kenny. God, I freaking loathe that guy, always meddling where he didn't belong. And everyone was coming for him. He made a hasty retreat and had intended to kidnap Zachary and take him on the run too. But that was the good news. Before he could get to him, Zachary had hopped on a bus and headed to New York to stay with his mom while things cooled off. As sad as I was that once again I had missed seeing him for the first time, I was relieved he was out of harm's way, safe and sound. Again, no alarm bells going off for the second time that I had made the trip up there and Zachary was not around. Josie called him on her cell phone and apparently he picked up his mom's because he never had his own cell. And we got to enjoy one of the rare times we actually spoke on the phone. All was well now for a week of fun plotting on what we were going to do to Jacob the next time he reared his ugly head. Later on that week, Josie wanted to drive down to an old colonial part of Maryland and go ghost hunting on these abandoned railroad tracks. However uneventful that may have been, we did end up inviting Sean to go with us. Turns out, Psycho Dude actually felt bad. Well, almost. He blankly told me that if I didn't have the balls to stand up to him, he would have killed me and my whole family for just $500. Instead of killing him on the spot, which every fiber of my being was telling me to do, I decided to play nice guy and get him on my side. That way, if Jacob ever tried that crap again, he would definitely tell him no, because I'm the cool dude. Sometimes you catch more flies with honey. Anyways, the rest of the week was normal and a damn good time. Josie and I said our goodbyes and we parted ways, wishing each other a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. The next couple of weeks was semi-normal. No word from Jacob at all. Not even a peep. What a gift, I thought. I'll take it. Year two of my relationship began quite happily, believe it or not. Even my birthday month of January was an unusually good one. Then came the next couple months, 2 months, which quite vividly live within me to this day. They also defined my life for the next several years. This is when the sky stopped falling and my world completely crumbled from beneath me into utter devastation. At the beginning of February, Josie had a sudden and urgent impulse to get away from her parents. Now I could completely understand that, so I happily agreed to let her come stay down south with me. I borrowed my best friend's car and drove a 15 to 16 some hour odd round trip all the way to Maryland and back. My parents were less than thrilled. They told me she couldn't live in the house with us. So I said fine and shelled out the money to a local La Quinta inn where she and I lived for almost 2 weeks before my parents caved and let us back in the house. Now, I forgot to mention something extremely important earlier about my boyfriend Zachary. He was very sick. I mean, terminally ill. But we thought it wouldn't be for years. I was told he had cystic fibrosis and he needed a double lung transplant in order to live much longer. He was hospitalized in the beginning of February and rushed up the transplant list because his condition was so grave. Can't even begin to tell you how, after the year we've been through together, how badly I wanted to be by his side. Unfortunately, he was in a hospital in a part of the country that specializes in treating cystic fibrosis and was way too far to travel to. Josie kept me in pretty good spirits about the whole thing. She had a lot of experience with CF since her sister died from it several years earlier. She reassured me that since he was so young and tried to take such good care of himself, that he would probably receive donor lungs very soon and be just fine. I try not to worry too much, but in reality, I worried my ass off. Losing him after getting him out of harm's way so many times before was not an option in my mind. How could we have overcome so much for him to succumb to this disease? I really hope this dude is not lying to you, because this would now be the second boyfriend that you loved that you lost. So if he's lying to you, this is awful. Zachary and I talked constantly when he felt like it, and even though he was scared and alone, he said he felt like $1,000,000 knowing I was supporting him with my love no matter where I was. That made me feel wonderful being able to comfort him from so far away, and for a couple weeks, my comfort seemed to be doing the trick. Until one day, that day. My boyfriend died suddenly on February 14th, 2008. Guess he wasn't lying. So sorry. His lungs filled with fluid, he suffocated and died. There was nothing anyone could do. I was completely and totally lost. Josie broke the news and I collapsed into the biggest mess you've ever seen in your life. She was still living with me at the time, so she tried to console me as best she could, while she was shedding her own tears at the loss of her best friend. That forever ruined Valentine's Day for me. To this day, it only reminds me of loss and death. Don't realize how fragile your heart truly is until you've experienced a loss like that. Little did I know that even worse moments in my life were about to occur a month later. I was headed on a course for total destruction and still blissfully unaware of the one person who had been driving this crazy train from day one. I'm scared. I am literally scared to keep going. What what the fuck could happen? What could possibly happen? Skip forward to March, St. Patrick's Day to be exact, a little over a month since Zachary had passed away. Josie had forcefully been returned to Maryland by her parents, seeing as she had practically ran away. I was off in La La Land of booze, drugs, and more pain than either of those could cover up. I was chilling with my Satanist posse, doing what all normal American teenagers do on St. Patty's Day, pretending like we're Irish and testing the limits of alcohol poisoning. My alcohol tolerance back then was ridiculously high, so I had already drank an inordinate amount when the phone rang. It was Josie. I slurred my words as something to the effect of, "Hey girl, what's you doing?" That came bumbling out of my mouth. I announced the room was Josie, to which everyone replied, "Hey." She lived with us for several months, and love her or hate her, she became an honorary Southerner. The next words out of her mouth once again sent my head spinning off into space and my world into complete chaos. "Zachary's not dead." Stopped breathing for a moment, and when I caught my breath, I asked her to repeat that again. She did, except this time she added the fact that his life had been in danger, blah, blah, blah. So he had to hide, even from me, blah, blah, blah. Jacob just had to think he was dead, blah, blah, blah. I could literally feel my brain dripping out from my ears as my mind turned into mush with every word out of her mouth. Then, for the real kicker to my drunken mental meltdown, Zachary got on the phone. "I guess this means that you never went to Zachary's funeral." Sure enough, it was his voice. He apologized for what he had to do. I apologized for what I was about to do, which was scream and yell my lungs out, throw my phone into a wall, smashing it into a million pieces, and then proceed to go from being super hammered drunk to completely schmammered, wasted. I drank everything that wasn't nailed down. Who knows what other drugs I did on top of that? Because I sure don't remember. I was literally having a complete and total mental breakdown. The last strand of sanity in my brain just snapped. I did this for a couple more hours until I somehow drove back home, put on my work clothes, and tore out of the parking lot to go to my job in a city half an hour down the interstate, with people chasing me trying to stop me. I don't recall any of what happened next, but apparently this is what I did. I showed up to work completely wasted and got fired from a damn good job. I called my father freaking out in the parking lot of said job. He realized I was drunk and told me to stay there and he would come get me. Oh, how I wish crazy drunk me would have listened. Instead of doing that, I started driving on the interstate again, not caring if I lived or died. Right. But on the flip side of that, you could have killed somebody else. And obviously not caring about anyone else. According to the police report, I was tearing down the interstate at 130 miles per hour. I apparently hit 2 mile markers on the side of the road and blew both my right hand tires, but continued driving with sparks shooting 50 feet out the back of my car. Took the exit to the hospital going that fast and spun out, completely totaled what was left of my car, according to bystanders. I then proceeded to exit my vehicle and run across the damn interstate towards the hospital with people chasing after me. Once I got to the ER doors, I heard the now familiar whoop whoop of a police cruiser. I was so arrested for driving under the influence. Didn't see that coming. I blew a .20 about 12 hours after I had my last drink. If I had blown a .21, I would have gotten a felony charge. That led to years of failed drug tests, violated probations, and ultimately a year in jail down the line. After that, I decided enough was enough. These crazy people from Maryland and their insane concept of living could all go to hell as far as I was concerned. It had been nearly 2 years of torment, fear, and unimaginable pain. Worst of all, it was starting to cost me my mind and my freedom. I was done listening to Josie and ready to start listening to my actual friends in town who had been begging me to stay away from those people for a long time now. Some good friends sat me down and started to tell me all the inconsistencies in their stories over the last few years. First, I didn't want to listen. Then eventually, there's too much evidence not to listen. Finally, I opened my ears and my mind to what was really going on. I decided to figure this out once and for all. I got on MySpace, Facebook, and every other social media I could think of. I typed Josie's full name into the search bar of every single one. What I found to this day makes me want to turn my stomach contents inside out. There on every social media possible. By using her name and the few email addresses I knew she had, I found dozens and dozens of accounts linked to her emails. Duplicate after duplicate of Zachary's full name on accounts with pictures of her. And the same thing with Jacob and every single solitary other person in the supposed elite. That's when it finally, after years of denial and torment, it finally freaking hit me like a railroad car full of bricks. Holy shit. She's every single one of these people. She's absolutely and unequivocally made up every single solitary one of these people and has been pretending to be a dozen or more people for over 2 years. What the actual fuck? Meanwhile, who has time to do shit like this? Who who has time to do shit like this? I wish I had this much time. As you can imagine, my jaw hit the damn floor. Thank God I had some close friends there who kept me from falling apart and helped me find every single fake profile she had ever created. I was dumbfounded. Profile after profile after profile that had her pictures and the names of people I thought were entirely real. Prototype accounts before she ended up making the actual fake accounts. Gag or jokes to her, really. In fact, all of this had to be one big, insane, psychotic joke. I was too shocked to be enraged yet, but don't worry, that's coming. I diligently copied every link to every single one of her profiles into my AOL Instant Messenger. Then I called her. How are you? I'm alright, I guess, just bored. You? Nope, definitely not bored over here. Get on AIM chat and I'll show you something really interesting. I was nearly hysterical at that point, and I could tell she knew something was up. Once she was online, I simply asked her, "Hey Josie, what are these?" Then sent her the link to every single fake profile she had ever created in her miserable life, and a few email accounts I didn't even know belonged to her. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening as I heard her clicking through link after link. Her 2-year-long mental game was over, and she finally realized it. Her words? "Well, fuck, man, guess you got me." Those are your words. Those are the words. She then started to laugh, genuinely laugh, as though something remotely funny had just occurred. I don't recall what I said, but apparently it was bad enough for my friends to take away the phone and hold me down. Catfish, the show or movie, wasn't around back then, so I unwittingly became one of the first hardcore victims of a stalker in the internet age. Worse than that, I had to live with and even befriend the girl who had been stalking and trying to ruin my life for over 2 years. It was literally, and still is, the single biggest mindfuck I've ever had in my entire life. Thousands upon thousands of messenger conversations, hundreds of thousands of hours of phone conversations, countless amounts of cash being spent to drive up several states just to stay with my psycho stalker every single time. Even bringing her down to live with me for months, having $5,000 mysteriously vanish out of my bank account. Everything was starting to make sense. There was no Jacob. There was no Zachary. There was no gang. What there actually was one completely batshit insane girl with more mental problems than could fit in an encyclopedia. She was the only person I ever talked to. She was the only person I ever saw, and worse, she was the one that paid Sean to come down to my house with the gun and try to kill my entire. Oh my God. And you moved her. Oh my God. Josie was the only person in these last 2 years that had orchestrated any of this. From all the fake kidnappings and boyfriend drama to faking the deaths of someone I'd fallen in love with and bringing him back just to screw with my head. Who the hell does that? I'm mindfucked. I'm not kidding you. All the events of the last 2 years came flooding into my mind as I realized in each and every one it was solely her and no one else but her. So many questions raced through my head, the least of all being why me? I deleted my MySpace and made my Facebook private. I only accept friends that I know are real. I fell completely off the wagon and out of my head. Drugs, alcohol, and more drugs. That's all I could do to cope. Here I was, a gay man that had unknowingly fallen in love with a straight woman, and regardless of whether or not I thought it was a gay man, which I wholeheartedly did, that shit still fucks you in the head pretty bad. I didn't think I could ever be close to someone again. My world had been rocked and ruined. To this day, all these years later, I still do not trust people. I don't think I will ever be able to trust someone again. Can you blame me? No, definitely not. I don't blame you. She came down here. Yep, you heard me right. That bitch moved into my sister's town, not even a half hour away from me. I bumped into her by accident and we started talking. Again, as much as I want to stomp her in a bloody pulp on the ground, you catch more flies with honey. I wanted answers. Hell, I deserve them. I told her I was just trying to forgive her and I needed answers to my questions in order to do so. I asked her if she would sit down with me and tell me everything, and she reluctantly agreed. I politely informed her that this forgiveness was not for her, it was for me, so I could stop holding on to and living in the past. I explained she nearly killed me, ruined my life, and what she did was the most personal and horrific thing one human being can do to another, especially after I was so damn good to her. She was polite and let me get what I needed off my chest. I tried to be calm and not rude so she wouldn't run away. And I did get closure, somewhat, and answers to everything. Here's our explanation. Take it with a grain of salt. It started as a joke when she was in high school. There was a girl who was being mean to her and bullying her. So she thought she'd get her back by getting her to like a guy online and reveal the awful truth later. Haha. She made a bunch of prototype profiles and eventually almost 20 profiles in total. So it looked like this group of people had the same friends and that they were real. Just pulled pictures off of freaking Google. She knew none of these people in real life. She was having a good old time tricking this girl when along comes a spider to mess up her web. Me. She said she thought she would just mess with me a little bit and let me know she was actually a girl. But after talking to me, she unintentionally fell in love with me. Whether it's true or not, I don't know what to believe. If she really did love me, then why put me through pure freaking hell for 2 years? She said she wanted to tell me a million times, but it just got out of control. And before she knew it, she was really getting into being these people. And someone believed she was them and that they were real. Again, this chick is the world's best bullshitter I've ever met. So who knows what the truth really is? All I wanted to know was how did she get the music and how did she sound like the guy on the phone? The music, as she shockingly demonstrated to me, was actually hers. She's an amazing pianist and guitar player. I saw this with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears. Zachary's voice on the phone wasn't very complicated. Paid a guy friend a few bucks to be in on it, which this jerk off eagerly agreed to. Ruining someone's life for a few bucks, how sweet. Sean was all her. She paid him $500 to do that, and she had zero explanations as to why. She knew he would do it. He's just as much of a psycho as she is. The rest of it was pure fantasy and imagination, all dolled up to be extra crazy so I would care more about Zachary and give her more attention. As lie after lie was finally revealed and the truth brought to life, I had heard enough. After around 8 hours of this, I had heard everything I really ever needed to hear. My life was nearly destroyed, my family nearly killed, my mental and emotional health left scarred forever, simply because she wasn't getting enough attention in her life. Neither was I when this started, but I didn't go about like a human wrecking ball trying to make myself feel better. I'll never be able to comprehend or understand the mind of someone like that. People who derive pleasure from other people's pain and misery. I'll never be able to fully trust, not in the way that's required of a true partner and companion. I just can't do that again. If I'm mortally betrayed again, I know the next time will kill me. So, as I write this in my apartment, a little over a decade after it happened, I'm alone. One good thing that came from this, it sure as hell made me the person I am today, and it strengthened and toughened my resolve into tempered steel. I learned to be okay with myself and to finally love myself after so many years of self loathing. I'm a pretty amazing person. I don't need a man to define my life, and who am I in any shape, form, or fashion? Obviously, I'm worth something. Otherwise, this psycho chick wouldn't have latched onto me for years and ended up moving 8 hours away from her home to be 30 minutes away from me all this damn time. What she stole, I will never get back. But what I gained, she could never take away from me again. I am completely mind blown. I truly am. Whoever this is, I am so sorry. You don't deserve, nobody deserves this. Oh my God. This is horrible. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's going to take a lot of time. It's obviously taken a lot of time already, but one day you're going to be okay. All right, guys, if you're still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you so, so, so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet and you feel so inclined to, because it really helps me out and I really, really appreciate it. If you guys have any stories, if you stumble across anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always looking for new ideas. And until next time, stay safe out there.